Honestly unbalanced.
Guys, to let you know where we're going with this podcast, Adam has been a guest before. We had a great episode, talked about his journey, his path. We're not going to do that today, but you should follow Adam Keen on Instagram because he has lots of kind of like little tidbits where he'll have a series of images exploring an idea. Sometimes it's philosophical, sometimes it's related to teaching, and we're going to dig into them today. Okay, there might be some difference of opinion. So I'm going to ask
Well,
Adam
we
to
like
present
that.
his
We like, yeah,
ideas, and we might have an expanded conversation, or
absolutely.
we
Please.
might entirely agree. So let's talk first about belly breathing and what belly breathing
Oh
means,
God.
because yoga teachers tend to say a lot of stuff we don't mean, and
Okay.
there is intention behind that. Like when I say breathe into the belly, obviously we don't literally mean breathe with your
Mm,
belly.
mm.
So I'd love you to unpack number one, what you mean by belly breathing, and is it okay to say these kind of things to our students when anatomically it's not correct per se, but it means something that has a desired outcome.
I think the terminology is fairly straightforward. It's like you're breathing into your stomach, sure, but because the diaphragm pushes downwards and it'll expand your stomach. Obviously, everyone knows you haven't got lungs in your stomach. So that's, I think for most people that's clear and that's not a worry. But I mean, the thing is, in my opinion, it's not that's not the correct way to use the diaphragm in yoga because what you're trying to do is support the thoracic chest, support your core more, and also you're using the yoga to stimulate the nerves of the spine. And belly breathing will get you into the parasympathetic nervous system by use of the diaphragm, just due to probably the vagal tone there, the vagus nerve and the tone there. And upper chest breathing, the thoracic breathing, will get you into the sympathetic nervous system, a lightly stimulated state. And I think that's the irony of most people in modern yoga that they're looking or assuming that yoga just allows you to calm down and chill out. Whereas actually, the original uses of hatha yoga, hatha meaning force, are suggesting otherwise, suggesting that you're actually trying to stimulate your nervous system for a change in consciousness. It's not all relaxation. So if you're trying to do that, then it's not belly breathing. I hate to say it.
Now this links to something else. You said, an aim is changing consciousness. And in another series of posts, you kind of compared what do we want? Are we looking for
What do we want? Yeah,
change in
yeah.
state, or are we looking for complete cessation of thought and a no state, a living corpse? So what do you think we are looking for? Change or
Okay,
nothingness?
okay. Certainly, that again, I think that's an easy one. I mean, I don't think anyone's looking for cessation of consciousness. I mean, unless you're, really, really depressed, which, not to mock that, it's possible. But a general healthy state of mind, you're not. No one, I can believe, in all honesty, is looking for Patanjali and the Patanjali's idea of yoga chitta vritti nirodha, and that's what he means. Yoga is the cessation of thought, not like a little break. It's the cessation, right? So, I don't think that, I don't think we're looking for that. We're looking for transformation of our consciousness to a better one, right? To a more satisfactory one. But ultimately, I was going to say something else there. Yeah, I mean, the reason for the thoracic breathing is it's stimulating the nervous system, and belly breathing doesn't do that. But if you were to use belly breathing to do yoga, that would also be adequate in terms of trying to use yoga for relaxation, use yoga for calming the nervous system down, which is a valid aim and more than ever in modern context, but nevertheless isn't the original aim, which is looking for a different kind of methodology around it. But belly breathing would be adequate if that's what you were looking for in yoga, just to calm your nervous system. But in which case you'd also be doing a different style of asana, in my opinion, because if you're doing dynamic, challenging asana, then you would need to be breathing on your upper chest. I believe to make sure that you have a firmer core. You're trying to keep the core pressured. If you're breathing in your belly, it doesn't do the same job. Yeah, but there's a technical little thing. Sorry, Adam. There's a technical little thing with the diaphragm because you can move the diaphragm at both ends, right? It has a start and it has an end. Depending on which way you move it, it will put the breath in the bottom half of your cavity and your abdominal cavity, or the top half in your thoracic cavity. And to belly breathe is easy because the diaphragm you're moving from its start, and to thoracic breathe is more difficult because you're trying to hold the bunda, your lower abdomen area, to make yourself breathe from the sides, from its insertion, from the rib cage. Complicated. I'm sorry.
No, no, perfect. But now you said there something could be a valid aim of yoga, kind of relaxation, etc. Could be a valid aim, but not
Absolutely.
necessarily the original intention. So the question then, like you are maybe exposed more to a certain type of yoga. because you teach yoga master classes, etc., and people are coming for your expertise in an Ashtanga lineage style of yoga. So you're not necessarily exposed to people that want chilled out, calm yoga necessarily. Maybe I'm wrong. So, what are your thoughts on the extent to which someone's stated aim of their yoga practice can change while it's still being called yoga?
Hmm. Right. Well, I think there's twofold. The methodology has to be to be calling it hatha yoga, which is the method of asana. I think that we can link ourselves to. Most likely, it has to have right tension. You have to be doing something to pressurize or stimulate the spine, right? Hence, tapas is basically heat, but it's really a synonym or a metaphor for pressure. You're trying to create right tension towards the body to pressurize your central channel. That's hatha yoga. Now, if you were using yoga in a classical sense to stabilize the mind for meditation, say, yeah, to settle yourself down for meditation, like more classical yoga, then you'll be looking for the methodology in a different way to maybe use belly breathing, to use a few asanas, to focus on postures that did that more. But in either sense, I think to call it yoga overall as an umbrella term, you'd be needing to be interested, be aiming at something other than simply calming yourself down.
Chilling out.
You'd need, yeah, I would need to. I mean,
It
to be
can't be
able to put it
have a
under the
bath or
umbrella
do
of
some
yoga.
yoga. Same
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. It can't just be that. Otherwise, it's a long way round to having a bubble bath with candles, isn't it? At the end of the day, do something easier for yourself, right? Like if that's the aim, I think there's easier things to do. Yoga's always been about something to do with resolution of consciousness, a resolution of the human experience, right? Making it more satisfactory, right? And so as long as you're doing that in some form or fashion, or that's some part of the aim, I think we can rightfully and justifiably call what we're doing yoga. It doesn't mean it's just your aim. I mean, no one just aims for that. And for years, I was in Mysore, India, as you probably know, the heart of Ashtanga yoga, doing advanced gymnastics because it gives you a massive ego. And I wanted to do those things, and I felt good about those things in my body and what I could do and amongst my peers. So that was part of the aim. Not saying it was right, but just saying that within our yoga journey, there's multiple aims, and some are higher and some are lower. And it's just a question of gradually kind of crystallize them into a deeper thrust, I suppose. Yeah.
And you've explained some interesting things that yoga can offer there. That you've said, there's easier ways to relax, i.e., have a bath. But I think there's equally easy ways to raise your heart rate and work hard, like just going for
Yeah.
a run or doing a hit class. 10 minutes of a hit class will probably burn as many calories as doing an hour of vinyasa flow and alike. There's
I would say so. Yeah, yeah,
yoga is so
yeah.
unique in what it can offer, and even in terms of kind of, I always compare it to fun. I don't want yoga to be fun necessarily, because if I want fun, there's so many better ways to have fun. We can have sex, we can go to cinema, etc. I don't want yoga to be fun because it offers something that is so unique. I want it to be a learning experience of self-inquiry.
Yeah, and I think that then goes back to what are we doing in the first place? And we're talking about yoga here. Obviously, your podcast and your teaching and my podcast and my teaching is focused on yoga asana, right? And so if we're looking for a line in the sand of what makes yoga asana specific, right, and why we can't say we're doing yoga when we're gardening or when we're doing yoga. Oh, my
Mm.
yoga, like you hear, oh, my yoga's like, I don't know, playing the piano or whatever. It's like yes and no. I mean that's concentration. So in some form or fashion, it is circling around the issue, which is to concentration, developing one-pointed concentration. But it's not asana. And
Mm.
if we're making a line in the sand in asana, it's due to the spinal stimulation again, and the fact that yoga is so different because it's doing all these movements with the spine. You're constantly twisting it. You're folding forwards. You're flexing it. You're extending it, right? You're doing all these movements with the spine. And again, what we haven't talked about is what about these legs? What is all this stuff with a lotus? Where does that come from? Where do you see that in any other physical modality? So if you're looking like from almost as a naive observer from the outside, you say, this is weird. This is unique. Why is it unique? Okay, well, it's all to do with the sacral energy. It's all to do with the spine. So why not, if we're using that method, and if you're seeing, if you can kind of see it from the outside, then go with that. Like, if that's what we're trying to do, then why and how can we
Mm.
do it? Right.
I like that line in the sand. The other line I have, because you mentioned gardening, is a line between an informal and a formal practice. Like, I don't believe your yoga practice can be you doing your gardening. I think you can garden in a way that is informed by your long-term yoga practice, and
Fair
interact
enough.
with the world in a way that is informed by it. But I don't believe it can be your practice. We've chosen asana as our main vehicle for practice, but I
Yeah.
think there needs to be an intentional formal practice.
I think if you don't have some kind of line in the sand in terms of your approach to it, right? Like, and again, like mine has come down now to looking at the tantric roots of yoga and saying, okay, this is the yoga I teach. It's affiliated to the original ideas of Tantra, which is to do with Kundalini. I'm not recommending Kundalini, but it's a kind of Kundalini light, if you were. You can still stimulate the spine to affect changes in the consciousness, albeit you're not raising Kundalini anymore. So if asana goes back to those texts and we've just developed it from this kind of thing, then yes, there is a certain way to do it if you're going to be effective with it, right? And there is a certain aim, and that makes it a lot clearer. I mean, because I have, one of the difficulties you often have in retreats or workshops or whatever is someone comes up and says, "Well, I like doing the posture like that." And it's like, well, for a while I was kind of stumped. They say, well, I feel more comfortable. And, it's not like an anatomical thing that their body won't do it. It's just like they like doing it that way. And I don't agree with it, And so, right, I like doing triangle with my hips flat, right? So I can do it like I'm two planes of glass, for example. That's a common one. I feel good like that. I feel good pulling that back hip back. That feels right to me. And it's like, then I was wondering, well, why don't I agree with that? We could talk of alignment, but why? Alignment's arbitrary, really, right? It's certainly not aesthetics. And the person feels completely fine and happy and comfortable doing it like that, and they've done it like that for years. So it's not a kind of question of danger, right? They're hurting themselves. So why am I still thinking, or I'm very diplomatic, really, but wanting to insist in my mind, apart from it, it's my way, they do it in a different manner, right? And then I started to kind of realize that it was, that there is this line in the sand that I could kind of fathom, which is to do not just with intention, not just to do with stretching, because, well, there's many ways to stretch, right? That yoga is particular because of the right tension in the spine. You're trying to put the spine under right tension, yeah, and that has a soteriological, can say that bit of a tongue twister, a spiritual, a cathartic aim of consciousness to
And
change your consciousness.
how would you, let's stick with that example. So that person is squaring their hips to the side of the room in triangle. I don't know whether you're working the one-to-one or like, but how would you then persuade them not to do it that way, to do it your way? Because you're empowering them with knowledge. Like, how would you say that in a concise way regarding spine?
Yeah, I guess that like what I said. I mean, you've got to have an argument, haven't you? Right? I mean, as a teacher now, you've done it for long enough. I have that. You don't want to wear yourself out now. You're battling against people, so you make an I see, right? So you make an argument, right? Like you've done it this way, and you've been taught this way, and right, like this is my reasons for doing it this way. Try it both ways, and over time, see what you prefer. I mean, that's all you can ever say, right? I mean, you can't force people to do it away, even if you feel that maybe, over a long time it would injure them. You have to come to these experiences on your own accord, right? If anyone tries to tell me something in my early years, I would probably adamantly not do it that way
Mm.
because I would kind of add to your authoritarian a little bit, I suppose, in my younger years. But so no, I make an argument. Of course, you have to give a reasoning, right? And especially in Ashtanga, that's lacking because people are still trading off this. Well, this is just the way we do it in Mysore. This is just what the Sharat Joyce or Patabi Joyce taught. This is the way they do it on the poster or in the book. And so why? Like
Uh,
again, it's like begs the question: oh, what? Why? What is it that you're doing here or trying to affect, really? And then people will say, "Oh, it's about Chittavritti and Rodhar. It's Patanjali," and I will say, "No, it's not, in my opinion, anyway." I mean, again, there's quicker ways around to meditating than jumping around for an hour and a half on a sticky mat, right? There's much better and more effective ways to go about stilling the mind for meditation than doing all this asana, I think.
I think that, yeah, I think empowering with a why is so important. There's two other little tools that I've used. One is if I'm teaching a public class, is the phrase "for me today." So that's not to say that anything you've learned from anyone else is wrong, but just for me today, do this. For me today in halfway lift, don't touch the legs, reach your arms back like you might in Warrior 3. That phrase, for me today, doesn't start arguments. That I found is really useful. And the other kind of tool I tend to use is not naming poses necessarily, or only doing it at the last resort. So I don't say let's come to Trikonasana and then let's sort out the alignment. It's more, reach forward, fingertips on the legs, create a feeling of rotation of the torso, but do let that back hip turn in a little bit, maybe go a little bit deeper. This is now kind of triangle pose. And that works very well. Because once you got people
Doesn't work in
into,
Ashtanga because they're already expecting. They
well,
know
they know
what's
they know what's happening.
you can't. They know what's coming next. You
So
can't
that's
do
where
that.
for me
That's a
today
good. I
comes
like.
in. For
Yeah.
me today,
No. Right. Okay. Try this. Try. No, I do the same. I mean, try it today. Like just humor me. I say humor me in this
yeah,
class, right? Like just try it this way, and then try it your way and see what you prefer because that's all we can ever do. And like you, I'm sure you've come to the situation where you think, bloody hell, I was insistent for some years perhaps on a certain detail. I can think of a few of myself, and I changed my mind. Like,
mm,
and so I mean, I'm kind of nuanced now in terms of my emphasis on things because there was things I really did believe in. I think in the earlier days of my teaching, which I've recognized that I've changed 180 degrees on. So nothing is
no, completely.
trust your own knowledge, but don't be too dogmatic because you might change.
On that note, it's kind of related, nothing to do with anything you've written on social media. The phrase, "Well, I'm listening to my body," because you said that person in triangle pose finds it easier, more comfortable. Then
They
listen,
might have even said that. They probably would have said that.
I'm
Smart
listening to
way.
my body in the same
Yeah,
way
yeah.
as, my body would let me have 2 bottles of wine tonight. It would say, keep going, have three. Why not? Listen to my. So I hate that phrase, listen to the body, or at least I have lots of caveats on the idea of listening to the body. What are your thoughts on the listening to your body phrase?
Yeah, yeah, it has to be qualified, doesn't it? I mean, because at the end of the day, you're the only person, in the plane, right? Like anyone can, like if you're the person in the plane, like the pilot, they don't care as much as you, right? So, ultimately, you have to fly your own plane and you have to take the consequences. Whatever I say doesn't really matter, in terms of I'm never going to experience their body, am I? So yes and no, because one would hope that I've built up a certain eye and a certain understanding of how the body works that I also might have some reasonable feedback on that. So it's a tricky one. It's nuanced, isn't it? I mean, again, in this modern parlance, you can't be gaslighting someone's own experience. If they feel that, then you can't say, well, that's not valid. Or I'm the last person to say that, right? That's not a valid way of experiencing yourself. I think there's so many places in life these days that we're squashed into having to be a certain way. So I've always been it's been really one of my missions to try and allow people to experience themselves in my classes in the way that they want to be.
Mm.
On the other hand, the body is it's a bit of a trickster, isn't it? And like yeah, I'm feeling my body feels like it wants to eat 3 Big Macs, and that's really like you have to be intelligent as how you listen to your body and process it, don't you? Like anything,
I
and
think
you build up a skill set in doing that. Yeah.
and it might be important when you're new on a physical journey, is you listen to the guidance of a qualified teacher, and then when you understand the why a little bit more, you then start to think, well, actually, how does it relate to me? So a good example could be compressing the lumbar, like heavily, like pushing back in a version of upward dog.
Yeah.
That in that your lumbar in the short term is probably saying, oh, it feels quite nice. You're squashing the muscles in that around the area. It feels to some degree like a massage. Keep doing that. Go further. Or maybe a teacher will help me go even further if they can get their leverage involved. But
Well, it feels
if we
like a
step,
stretch,
yeah, if or
It
I think it
feels like
often
you're
is like a
doing yoga.
massage
Wow, I've
to
got a
some
stretch
degree.
going on. Right,
And
right, right.
and then if we actually step back and understand what's going on in our spine, and we see how many yogis have been injured, including myself, like disc stuff going on in the lumbar because of that, then we can actually, okay, well, I'm listening to I understand what my body is saying, but the discs aren't communicating to me right now. But I understand what could be going potentially on in the discs, so I'm going to back off. We need that combo, but that only comes from
Yeah.
education.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we're struggling in modern society and with let's say, an over democratization
Hmm.
of the situation, right? Like, there's no hierarchy of scale anymore. Like, I think there was a massive, especially, I mean, looking at all societies in the UK and, especially, you've got this massive class system and suddenly it comes crashing down. No one wants any kind of a hierarchy anymore, even a play one, because obviously the yoga teacher isn't no higher than anyone else, but any form of authority is now seen as a negative thing. Who are you to tell me, right? I know as just as well as anyone else, right? Like, this is the kind of mentality I think we're facing in modern society.
Mm.
And it's a backlash. It's a backlash, isn't it, from a massive subservient situation where you weren't able to dictate at all the situation of your life. So now everyone is an expert, aren't they? Everyone's like you go to a 5-star restaurant, a Michelin star restaurant. As a chef, I always get frustrated by this. And people like some person, no background in food, feels quite happy, give a review. Same with ClassPass or something, right?
Oh God,
Jason Vandell, your friend, did a good
yeah.
post on this. Right? Like all these people, done 5 classes, but yet they're happy to slag. He's a crap yoga teacher. Well, like but you need to have a little bit of a background in this, right? So there does need to be like some kind of hierarchy, really, a gradient for learning to happen. There has to be a
Mm.
top-down gradient, and it's just a pantomime, it's just a play. But within that situation, I think it's helpful if you empty yourself out somewhat, but at the same by the same token, at the same time, you have to keep your critical faculties with you, especially in the modern context of all these teachers being kind of shamed and outed for things, But on the other hand, I mean, yeah, it's tricky these days, especially in the Western context. I mean, in the East, it's still a bit easier where the respect of the teacher is so much higher. But in the West, it's hard because everyone is an expert these days.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's a nuanced subject because by the same token, like I said to you before, I do still believe I don't want to be necessarily the authority in the room. I mean, ultimately, as much as I say yoga is about stimulating the spine, it has these kind of grandiose ideas about transformation of consciousness through doing this hatha yoga. Really, on the practical level, it's a space for people to be for an hour or 2 hours where they
Mm.
haven't got all the pressures of life collapsing in upon them, and they can be whatever they want to a certain extent. Yeah.
A little name drop of a book here is The Death of Expertise, which I think was written beyond its time. I think I read it about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Wonderful. The Death of
Have a look.
Expertise to
All
our
right.
listeners. But one thing you mentioned there was respect to the teacher, etc. And I think some of that has been distorted slightly in the West because worlds have been merged, like yoga group fitness worlds have been merged. And fitness instruction, there's nothing wrong with that, like nothing bad about fitness instruction, but fitness instruction often really isn't about education. You don't go to Barry's bootcamp class to learn, you go to have an experience. And I think lots of people from that world are moving into yoga, and even lots of studios are doing both of them, and the expectations are the
Mm.
same. That the yoga teacher should be doing exactly the same job as a fitness instructor. And again,
Mm.
I'm not in any way slating fitness instructors, but I just think they're entirely different ways of interacting with other human beings. Like I see myself as an educator. I'm not a
Mm.
space holder per se. I don't feel
Mm.
that I want to entertain, although I've got some mean dad jokes that I will say and repeat. That's you know, that's not my aim. My aim is to educate and keep people safe on that path, which is perhaps a little bit different to what might be happening in like a spin class. Not that there's anything wrong with a spin class.
But yeah, if you're educating though, what are you educating? I mean, because it isn't a system of just fitness. Like we said, if you want to get fit, and even if you want to stretch, to be fair, there's better ways to doing
Mm,
it than yoga. There, even stretching, there's safer, easier, simpler ways than doing all these funny, weird yoga stretches. And if you want to get fit and strong, well, it goes without saying, go to a gym and sensibly lift some weights. So I would beg the question to you, what are you educating? And if you're not holding a space for people's own process, then I would be at a loss to say what I'm doing. I mean, and as a kind of caveat with that, sometimes I wonder, like when I go to the gym and I see people being educated on fitness, and how to hold their bodies, I sometimes feel, especially with the Ashtanga world, that they're actually getting better instructions sometimes within fitness because I mean, the Ashtanga, often yoga, there's a camouflage around it, like, oh, we're doing yoga, so it's not about the body. It's like, well, it kind of is about the body if you're moving it, quite intensely for a long period of
mm.
time, then you need to know why and how that body's moving, right? And yeah, I still feel that yoga is somewhat lagging behind sometimes in the fitness industry,
So let
in terms of how to do these things safely and
let's
effectively.
step back there in terms of kind of the space holding. So when we talk about space holding, my view is that sometimes people might perceive they go to a class to just do their own thing. There's borderline
Yeah,
direction, but they can do their own thing. It's their space.
right.
And my view is not your
Mm,
space. You've chosen to come to a public class with a teacher.
yeah,
And in terms
yeah,
of education, and again, as you say, there are different levels of education. I've been to classes where it has just been call out the name of the pose, count a little bit, call out the name of another pose, count a little bit, or just call out the name of the pose with music playing and then occasional Rumi quotes thrown in for some dramatic effect.
yeah.
And I don't think there is necessarily so much education. Maybe there is a bit more room for self-inquiry, or I would argue actually some self-numbing in the same way as I
Oh,
might feel good after
absolutely.
watching
Yeah,
Netflix for an hour
yeah, yeah.
because it turns off my brain. And I think, a heavy music led class can do that, which is sometimes what people need. But my view as a teacher, which
Heavy
might
asana,
mean
practicing asana and intensely
well,
do the
yeah,
same thing.
but while
Right.
I'm becoming perhaps a little bit less popular sometimes in public classes because I want to educate and I can't leave it. My view is I'm not educating you about life, but we are choosing yoga asana as our vehicle to learn about ourselves or something beyond ourselves. And while we're doing that, we may as well do it in a way that is safe, sustainable, and has a byproduct of making us a little bit stronger and a little bit more equipped to move our physical bodies around the world. So that's how I perceive my education to be. It's about how we're safely, effectively using this vehicle of our body, with a little
Yeah.
bit in there of the weaving in the philosophy
Yeah.
via dad jokes, via I weaved in the other day lyrics from the Idols. You know, the Idols, a punk band.
No.
The lyrics were, if someone spoke to you the way you spoke to you, I'd punch him in the face, love yourself, which I think is wonderfully philosophical.
I like it. Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
weaving anything like
No,
that.
I kind of think, Adam, you create a great space, and I think, I don't think you like the term space because it sounds a little bit new agey, but I think that what you are creating is still like it's a space, it's a kind of vibe, a kind of. I think you give a supportive kind of certain kind of space for people to explore the possibilities of what it means to be embodied. So I would still argue that's what you're doing. I mean, I think to qualify for our listeners, probably we should say that we're coming from slightly different yoga worlds
Yeah.
because, an Ashtanga teacher, which comes from a quite a different background to Vinyasa teaching. Albeit, again, I see your posts or I see Jason Crandell, and I think, bloody hell, the Vinyasa world is much more informed about how anatomy works than the Ashtanga world still. There's a lot of catching up to the Vinyasa world in many ways. So yeah,
Mm.
but yeah, I mean, you're leading a different kind of space, I think, than Ashtanga. But my feeling is that you mentioned it before, like, oh, are the people, are people coming now for Chittavritti and Rodha? And I think, like superficially, I think that, yeah, we could say these days that's the main reason that modern yoga is modern yoga, that it's changed, that the context has changed from not being reborn again, right? Basically from realizing God and then not being reborn again, like, original yoga pre 20th century to feeling better in our lives, feeling better, feeling kinder, blah, 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 living our best self, whatever you want to call it, right? So that context has changed, apparently. But in reality, I feel that when people are coming to the class, at the end of the day, you look at what they're doing, you look at the way that they're striving, you look at the restlessness, you look at I mean, especially in Ashtanga, the way that people push themselves past the brink of pain to injury, and you kind of think, yeah, not just coming for that, you know,
Mm.
it's always been the same. There's a wish, whatever people will say to themselves, for something more, and it comes out in yoga that, um, so yeah, I don't know whether that's directly on your last point, but
No, no. Let's move to people pushing too hard. And pushing too
okay.
hard is one of the main
That's a good
causes of
segue.
injuries in
Yeah,
yoga.
yeah,
So
yeah.
people, I think injuries, my view is injuries are often either teacher induced or just to student overreach, like pushing too hard. Some of that overreach might be due to competitiveness. Some of it might be like self-flagellation. Another form of injury, I think, is repetitive strain, like doing the same thing repeatedly in an
Mm,
injurious way.
mm,
But let's touch now on people literally pushing themselves too hard. Okay.
yeah.
Why do you think people do that? And do you think it's a good idea? I'm guessing not. And then how can we persuade people not to push so hard? Is it just part of the journey that's inevitable?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's almost part of the journey. I mean, I think you did that. You're mentioning your lumbar spine. I certainly did that. Most people did that. And I think on pragmatically, because modern capitalist society tells us that if we push hard enough, we can get whatever we want. It's a linear journey, and then there's a lot of closed doors, and there's a lot of obstacles. And if you just exert your will against those things as hard as you can, then you'll beat the opposition, right? So we bring that into yoga. Naturally speaking, we're only doing what we do outside, on the mat, right? So, secondly, I think it's much deeper than that, and I think there's also a spiritual wish for transcendence, for something more than being more than just this body in this boring life with these same problems, like going home and making the tea or whatever else, in the limited sense of self, the constrainment of the body, which is always feels like, oh, you want to get out, it's just stuck, it's I'm not, the stiffness, with the wish to escape from stiffness. It doesn't just, like there's no reason why being stiff is bad. But it's psychologically, it's this wish to escape the boundaries, I think, and we see that, and we see, and then, I mean, the kind of like dovetailing with that, you have yoga as a penance, that this feeling of catharsis, this feeling that we want to get something out, and that's always been there. If you look at the roots of yoga by James Mallinson and Mark Singleton, right, the roots of yoga. well worth the read if your listeners want to. And I mean, they're tracing the roots of yoga basically back through the ages. And the first real recording of people doing asanas properly for a spiritual reason is for penance. Yeah, it's a penance, like a sacrifice, like doing something that hurts your body to transcend the body, like to get something out, to cleanse, to purify. Yeah, and so and we see that not just in yoga, we see the same thing in the Christian church, sort of flagellation. We see it in the Muslim tradition. We see it in any the penances, doing something. And you see, and that's probably the closest way you'd see a modern yoga class, or at least an Ashtanga one. You see people coming in, causing themselves continuous discomfort, if not suffering. And you think, well, actually, the modern, the modern roots of yoga aren't that dissimilar to the older roots of yoga, right? So I mean, I think there's many reasons why people push too hard. It's a fascinating subject, and I think
You,
if
you
we look at that, yeah.
you
Sorry.
mentioned this kind of capitalist ideal of, if you work hard enough, you can
Push hard
achieve
enough, you'll
the kind
achieve
of
it.
Ayn
Everyone will
Randism.
get to, yeah. Everyone
But
will get
then,
to the postures they want, and
but there
they're
was the
being
other
sold that.
end.
They're being completely sold that. They can't get to the postures they want because it's genetics and it's
Yeah.
ability, but completely sold that, especially in Ashtanga, oh, you just practice and all is coming. If you just practice hard enough, then you can be like me. And it annoys the hell out of me because it's half of it's just genetic gift and
Mm.
anatomical luck, but it's again, it's sold. You just practice, push your body hard enough, and maybe if you can't do it, I'll push you into it harder, and you'll get what you want. And also this idea that, well, when you get what you want, the teacher says with an elusive smile, it'll be naturally that posture was naturally related to a state that I have, right? Like, and the two things that's like a sleight of hand, isn't it? Like, what, leg behind the head, or that back bend you want, or that handstand. It's not just about that. When you get that, I'll say with a knowing smile, you'll achieve, like something else.
You'll be
It's like,
closer to me.
and the two, yeah, well, no, you'll be close to me, but you'll be closer to something happier, right? Basically,
Mm.
that they're the two things, the postural development and the happiness, have somewhat been merged together, and they're not bloody related. There's some of the
Mm.
most unhappy people I found in Mysore, in India. They're very advanced in the yoga practice, but it's a complete noose around their neck, right?
There,
Not
there-
happy at all by it.
there's now two streams of thought I want to go down. 'Cause one of them is that, and I think it's so important we create a culture in our yoga classes that people aren't, for me at least, aspiring to achieve poses. And I will often, the way I create culture is these constant jokes of, as you say, if you can do a handstand, at best your friends will be indifferent when you show them at a New Year's Eve party. Or, people are, there's no correlation between people that are doing the pose right now and happiness. But also the other angle I want to go down, I think more urgent for now, is the fact there are two ways that yoga is moving. There are still these people that want to kind of abuse their body and work hard and push hard to achieve, but equally maybe a slightly younger demographic who isn't so exposed to, let's say, capitalist ideals, feels that they deserve what they want. And they don't need the hard work. They are, by virtue of them existing, entitled to whatever they want. And being told that, do this course and you can become a yoga teacher, or do a handstand, or get spiritual purity in this 2 week course and the like. And that your yoga practice can be true to whatever you want it to be. You can do whatever you want in the room. And so I think the whole world of yogis now, who are either just like moving through asana and really not feeling anything, they're just dancing. Okay. And there is nothing wrong with dance, but I think dance
No,
has
I,
a
I
place.
totally, I
I
totally
like dancing.
agree. They're just dancing. That's
Yeah.
brilliant. No, I totally agree, mate. I mean, and the thing is, I'm kind of pleased I'm not in that Vinyasa yoga world, because I think it can easily, let's say, disintegrate into just like a glorified dance routine, can't it? No,
Mm.
if that. But with the Ashtanga, like, the demographic, I have to say, in Ashtanga has gotten older. Like, those people that are into Ashtanga, they already know the benefit of repetition. Like, I mean, well, there's obviously drawbacks to repetition, as you mentioned as well, but there's benefits to practice and practicing the same thing. Now, those people that recognize that, they're generally the kind of certain kind of person, probably, and oftentimes, it takes years to they're older. It takes time to come to that, doesn't it? So, and I do find that now, with all the choices of this, that, the other, with yoga and with music and with all kinds of things, those young people that used to go to Ashtanga, I mean, when I started it, I was like 19, right? Like, now I'm bloody too old to even mention. Like, I would never have gone into Ashtanga now with the options available. What I'm saying is that those
Mm.
people that go into Ashtanga now, it's like a dinosaur. They're they're generally, I generally get the older students. So to answer that question, the long and short of it is, like, I mean, like, I just did a retreat. I mean, by the way, with the average age was yeah, it's towards 60, right? I mean, that's doing Ashtanga. I mean, not to say there's always the case. Like I did one at Purple Valley in Goa, and the average age was, I think, 33. But like, there is an older demographic, I think, in Ashtanga, and people in that particular yoga that have a certain understanding of the benefit of practicing the same thing. So I don't have to battle against that so much, to be honest.
That's so interesting in that I haven't really thought about it in this sense. But like, if I look at the styles of yoga that were most popular when I kind of entered the world, so let's say the Bikram and Ashtanga, okay.
Yeah.
If I looked at the bodies of the people doing it back then, the demographic, they were all quite like the Ashtangis were like gymnasts, contortionists, young, loads of tattoos, etc. And then the Bikrams were like more like either athletic or looked like they'd never lifted a weight in their life. They were just really bendy. They were kind of, whereas recently, I guess if you see photos of those two worlds, it came to my head because I saw a photo of a Bikram studio the other day, and everyone I think was 40 plus in that studio, easily. Okay, and probably Ashtangis as well, either older or complete hippies. So
Are we are we dying out? Are we in a dying industry?
all the younger people, I think, because
Yeah,
and
they're
are
going to other stuff, group fit and all the
but
other.
no yoga,
There's.
but
Do
yoga that is more
you
like,
think
let's
so?
say,
Do
music
you think there's
driven, where
still
there is a cool
like?
crowd in the same way as like in America there was this big sauna culture. The younger cool people who want to be part of community are going to like run clubs or very dynamic music led classes with DJs and etc. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. Many of us, I'm sure, wouldn't have started if there wasn't an aspirational thing to do with if we're young men. There is
I
always
can't.
something
Yeah.
to look at that it's aspirational. I want to be able to put my leg behind my head. I want to do a handstand. I want to be as cool as that person. Uh, there is that, and I think there is just stuff now that is a lot cooler.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to say, I'm just starting feeling my age here because I don't have a clue what's going on now. And you're much more plugged in because you teach at Tri Yoga still. I haven't been in London for some years, and at the time, of course, it was fascinating to go in when I was teaching at Tri again, and going in and having a little wander around and waiting before classes and seeing what was going on. But now I'm a bit out of the loop in terms of what's going on. But I mean, I think I mean, back to my point, I do think that yoga is less. It was a huge boom. There was a huge boom in yoga, and I think that we're cresting the other side of that. I think there's a lot of disillusionment, both with fallen yoga teachers and also with the fact that yoga causes injuries now. We know everyone talks about yoga. Hear that now. We hear negative stuff about yoga where we never used to. We have this kind of tendency in human nature to build something up and then knock it down. And I think
Mm.
yoga's in the process of being a little bit kicked, a little bit knocked down right now. Whereas other things like, I mean, I was in Bondi recently, like in Sydney, a massive group fit culture. I mean, yoga not so much. Everyone's out, 6 a.m. running and doing all kinds of calisthenics, and that's what the young. I just felt that that's what the young people are doing. That
Mm.
that's what they want, and yoga is just like, as you say, like it's for an older demographic. I think
I think it's
more
also a little
now.
bit diluted now. I don't. I think overall there are still loads of people doing yoga. I think it's just the style of yoga they're doing is different, and there's a dilution. What I mean by that is maybe back in the day there would be one or two studios, or you would find one Mysore practice in
Yeah,
a big city. Whereas
absolutely.
now
Yeah,
there
yeah.
are so many
There's 10.
teachers,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
even around Tri Yoga Camden, let's say, there's an infinite number of studios within a mile, plus lots of independent teachers running their own thing. It's
yeah,
everywhere. So community is
yeah,
kind of gone, and class pass exists. I don't know if you're familiar with class pass, where it's just random people will turn up to class, and sometimes you'll teach a class. It's like I don't really know anyone here, but I'm still going to obviously teach a good class. But and that's where I think what's changed is that there's still a huge amount of people doing yoga, but just across the city, and less people going deep into the more it's traditional, whatever that means, practices. But you've said you're old, okay, and you wrote a post about being an older teacher. And I'd love you to
yeah,
expand on the learnings that you've get. Like, you're not really an older teacher, but you're
yeah. I
older than
mean,
the 20,
yeah,
30 year olds.
yeah, I am. It's one of those things, isn't it? You just don't realize how it happened. Like, you never, when you're 20 or 30, you never ever think you're going to be that old, but then you are. And I actually got my birthday wrong. I thought I was 44, but it turns out I'm 45, going on 46. And my wife just told me.
And
So
I've never got any idea either. I actually have to ask
yeah,
Holly what my
kind
age
of
is.
kind of a bit disappointed about that. But nevertheless, so I'm always 46. What have I learned? Yeah, to be more diplomatic, understanding of more what I'm doing. I don't know. I mean, there's many benefits of being a younger teacher as well. You have the inspiration, you have the enthusiasm. If 20 people turn up from a class pass, well, you've got 20 people in the class. Whereas now, if 20 people would turn up with class pass, it's like, oh God, like they don't know me, they don't know, they probably never come back again. Do you know what I mean? So I think that's, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna piss on any younger teachers, because I think there's a lot of things I look back and I think, wow, you are really, really, probably overexcited, but like you had a strong energy and a strong motivation. I used to do all the classes with people, right? So which is good and bad, right? Like it certainly inspired them. I was literally counting and demoing along with the whole class, and I did that up until fairly recently at Try Yoga. Whereas now I don't, I show a posture now and again, but I'll be watching the people, which is beneficial in other ways because then I can see what they're doing and I can maybe help. Whereas I couldn't really see what people were doing before. I was just demoing and leading the class. I don't know. I don't have anything better to say about that. The benefits of being an old teacher, maybe just kind of grouchy and world weary. And I don't know.
And
No,
just to
on a
clarify,
serious,
I haven't
yeah,
just
yeah.
decided you were old. This was a post that you wrote about. I haven't just decided to
Did I
go down
say?
that
I,
path.
I don't think I said on a better. I don't, yeah, no, no. I didn't say. I mean, you're that. You're
Use what
following
you've
hot on
learned as
my.
a
You're following
learnings
hot
of
on
an
my
old
heels
teacher.
anyway. Yeah. No. Yeah. Like I think I really. The fact that people are coming from all different places, I think, to answer it seriously, and that you never know what people are feeling. And you're right, because there's so many situations where I'll be trying to work with someone, especially in the Mysore style, which is a self-practice style, right? And you're in a class and everyone's doing their practice, right? Because it's Ashtanga, so they know the sequence. They're all doing it independently if people don't know, and they're practicing along, And so you're going around, everyone's doing their Ashtanga practice, and you're able to work with people individually, And there might be times like, we're trying to work with someone or trying to suggest they do this or that or the other, and then maybe I look around and they burst into tears. What's going on? We take them outside. And happens that this is happening in their life, and I was just trying to maybe perhaps shortly, frustratedly, or try to help them or do something. Why are you doing that? Why don't you try like this? And they, so I think to never underestimate what people cope with in life,
Mm,
and that gives you a lot of compassion, a lot of patience, and a lot of openness to just try and like I said, to allow people to have their own experience. Because as you get older, one thing that everyone realizes as you get older is that yeah, life is, like life is hard. When I was young, I wanted enlightenment. Now I'm happy to have enlightenment as the traditional way, absence of suffering, right? Like
mm,
that sounds pretty good. Like as you get older, you recognize that life is hard for everyone, and people go through really, really tough stuff. And so to bring that into the yoga sphere, I suppose is the process of aging and understanding that on a personal level, and being able to apply that to individuals. Yeah.
lovely. There's a there's a dictionary that's a piece of fiction, and it's called the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And it's this guy's just written a blog called the Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows. And
I
there's
like it.
one word he decided to create called Sonder, Sonder, and it describes really what you've just said. The idea that everyone you pass by is leading a life as infinitely complex and as challenging and hard as your own. Uh, and I'm not even going to try and remember the rest of it. I'm going to butcher it. But if you look for kind of Sonder Dictionary of Obscure Sorrows, it's such a beautiful definition of that. And I think, yeah, as you said, we realize that more and more. And I feel that compassion is what I'm aspiring to have, not empathy. I want to have compassion for people. And I think they are very different things.
Right. I think I've tried. I looked at when you were saying that. Was thinking, yeah, like so. What I'm looking for maybe is to be a person and not so much a yoga teacher. Like before, I was really, for many years, even hiding behind the persona of a yoga teacher. This is what
Mm,
I do, and it's easy to create a separation between myself and other people through being that thing, and then that's valid as well. And not everyone wants to interact with a human being directly, but for those that do, yeah, I suppose I'm more and more trying to be myself, yeah, as a person, interacting directly with people through the vehicle of what we're doing here, rather than, I've got something to teach you. It's Ashtanga yoga, like, this is the thing that will solve your life. I certainly, especially with Ashtanga people, certainly had that kind of proselytizing spirit with it, rather than look, like trying to connect with someone honestly, directly. And for those, again, like I don't force it upon anyone because many people may not wish for that currently, but
mm,
but for those that do, yeah, try and not to hide behind the persona of being the teacher so much because you can easily get into this one being a teacher as well that you kind of know more. I think that
mm.
maybe everyone well, not women, people, rather than just
Hang on,
another
sorry,
person.
sorry. I've got to interrupt. I lost you there for a second, and you came back with the phrase "women." Huh. So
No, no,
for
no.
I
It
know,
was
no,
it was
I
like
know you didn't
men,
say that, but that your video just
women,
paused for a second.
right? No, it was men. I said a teacher of men as an expression, women or people, as in we can't say gender anymore. Yeah, it wasn't a disparaging comment upon
No,
women.
no, but I might need to cut that a little bit out because it makes no sense in that kind of
Yeah.
in that
Anyways,
kind.
moving on from there. Yeah, I mean, just being a person amongst people, and somewhat, yeah, just trying to be honest as well, and say like, like I said recently, like, you know, due to anatomical reasons and due to pushing myself too hard, I'm in line for a hip replacement, and rather than, so, and to bear that, in all honesty with people, rather than like, I'm this kind of, because it sells, doesn't it? And it's easy to do. I'm this superhuman yogi who,
Yeah.
can do all this stuff, and I know all kinds of stuff, how to move my body, but I also know spiritual stuff as well, because as I said, that kind of dovetails in together. And you kind of believe your own publicity, and it's a frightening thing
And
to
this is I think the issue
realize.
with
Yeah.
teachers that teachers face is commercially, as you say, you might actually be more successful if you put yourself on a pedestal to some degree. And that you present yourself
Yeah,
as
present yourself as a yogi god.
as someone
Like
that can
I
do everything and knows
wrote a
everything.
post on that recently. Absolutely, yogi gods sell because we don't, again, because of the difficulty of our lives. We're getting kind of quite deep in this podcast. Really, we don't want them because of the difficulties of our lives. We want Hollywood. Like we don't want a teacher to be. I probably wouldn't have wanted a teacher myself to say, oh, actually, like this yoga. Part in part is responsible for meaning the hip replacement. I wouldn't have wanted to hear that. I want my
Mm.
teacher to be Yogi God, right? Like we can, through doing these postures, reach a certain state. And this teacher, they're embodying that state. I just want, right? Like I believe that in my 20s. I want to be like them, and it's like, because it's just like watching a Hollywood film, isn't it? We don't want too much reality, especially in our time off. And yoga is pursued after all these days in a recreational sense, So yeah, yeah.
It's a hard one to. It's a very hard one to navigate because for me, I can't do all the poses that I used to do because I'm just really busy being self-employed and trying to be the best dad I can possibly be. I don't have as dynamic and strong an asana practice as I used to. My body fat percentage is also increasing relatively steadily. And I will often in class be quite sarcastic about that, you know, allude to the fact, it doesn't really matter anyway. And I just want, and I do think to some degree there will be some people that are like, well, actually, no, I want my yoga teacher to demonstrate all these handstands in class. I want them to be able to do that. But for me, I think I've got to a point where, thanks to social media, people know me and I got enough views, let's say, for people, so the people that really want that to care. But the hard thing is if you're a newer teacher, when
Mm.
you can't trust that you can really get the real you out, you kind of have to almost to some degree present yourself as this. And that's how I did it initially. I presented myself this super
Yeah.
athletic guy that could do these
Mm,
incredible
mm.
stuff. It's hard to
Yeah.
navigate.
Your early images are formidable. I mean, incredible, beautiful images of your postures. Yeah. I never had that, mate. I never from the day one. I mean, I was known in a certain sphere because I had physical ability in Ashtanga. So I was known amongst certain Ashtanga sphere to a certain degree. And in London because of my background, I was employed at well-known centers. We mentioned Tri Yoga as one. But on the social media sphere and on my more recent recognition, it actually is just being honest, actually,
Mm.
quite the opposite. I was present the way that I got any recognition, if I can claim that on an international level, is not by presenting the shiny picture, actually. It's been presenting reality. That's the irony of this, because yes, I could say that probably for certain people, idealism will sell to a certain degree. But I think increasingly also we've got to say that people have gotten over that and they want reality. Like I think we want increasingly reality out of people at the same time, especially on social media. If I was
Mm.
to contradict myself slightly there, we do. We're looking for that as well in yoga teachers, and I suppose the evidence is me and the fact that people have reacted well to an honest and nuanced discussion of yoga rather than just me presenting me in a nice posture or something like that.
Now we're not going to do it. We're time poor now, so I'm not going to
Sure.
do
Yeah.
quick
Yeah.
fire. But what
Oh
I'd
no.
love you to do
Yeah,
is actually we could do quick fire, but what I'm more inclined to
yeah.
get you to do is do a
Never get to do the quick fire.
okay, we'll do quick fire, but
I always give them. I never get them.
I
Yeah.
want an elevator pitch now for Dharma
Oh
because
God.
you've got an online course I believe coming soon about Dharma,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
you wrote a
Great.
post about
I
it
should have
today.
mentioned that. Yeah, yeah.
So, well, we talk about it now.
Online
So give me
online Bhagavad Gita course. Yeah.
an elevator pitch of what is Dharma and how are people misunderstanding it.
Oh God. I think Dharma's usually taken these days at finding your thing, finding your bliss or finding the thing, and it has to be a big thing. And actually, it doesn't, and I think that because the way that we understand Dharma currently is not the way that they would have understood Dharma 2,000 years ago when the Bhagavad Gita was written, right? Like you were born into a society, you were born into a role and a job. So your Dharma was pretty clear, and all you had to do was keep your place in society, and society would be stable. So we have to admit these days is that Dharma is a little bit of a tabula rasa, a little bit of a open playing field for us to decide how we relate to that term. And it is more nuanced, right? Because in this fluid society these days, we don't have probably one dharma of our life's calling, right? Like, I mean, I've always done yoga. You have, Adam, but I think, well, actually, you've had more incarnations than I have. In fact, you were a lawyer, I think, and a few other things, right? But most people have many dharmas in their life, and it's not just one thing. Like, you may have a dharma as a mother, you may also have a dharma as a yoga teacher, right? Like, so I think it bears a more of an in-depth discussion as what Dharma is now. And also to say, well, it's my Dharma, well, it begs the question, isn't it? I mean, these days we're all looking for a purpose. Like, what is our Dharma? Like, what is the meaning? Like, how to live a meaningful life? And so I think it's a consideration of the term Dharma rather than say, well, it is this or that. And I think that in the consideration of the term in pure Socratic style, I think we can come to asking ourselves some interesting questions about our life, right?
And
Because
where can people
again,
learn
like
about this more?
yeah, I mean, just come to either Keen on Yoga website or Adam Keen Ashtanga on social media, and you come to the course and discuss it because I
When
think
does it
it's
start?
interesting to have a
Sorry, the
discussion
course.
about it as well. It's this weekend, so it's going to be a
Oh,
discussion. Yeah, I'll present a few things. So I'll probably be out by the time
yeah,
you've done this, but they can watch it and record or something. But yeah,
perfect. And then we'll do a
yeah.
quick fire as requested. We'll do a quick fire. So, one asana that you wish you had dropped from your practice sooner.
I'll probably leg behind head now, given the hip replacement stuff.
Okay. Next is if you were no longer allowed to do Ashtanga yoga for a random reason, what style of contemporary practice, asana practice, would you
Yeah.
be drawn to?
That's got to be quick here. It's got to be quick here. I don't know. I really like, honestly, Adam, I really like your stuff with vinyasa and Jason's stuff. And I think an intelligent vinyasa class, I like the ideas. I mean, yeah, I see a lot of good in that, yeah, in the way that you're doing things now. Yeah, it's nice.
Most recent book you've read that in some way aligns with what you believe the world should be learning in terms of improvement or yoga.
Oh man, read too many. Elliot Goldberg's Modern Path of Yoga. I love that book. I'll always come back to it. It gives you such a good context on how yoga developed into what it did in the 20th century. Modern Path of Yoga, Elliot Goldberg. You can buy it on all your online booksellers.
And any non-yoga book that you feel has value that you're currently
Oh man,
reading or have read recently?
yeah, I don't read that many non-yoga books. I mean, I think that a book I'm reading now is by Mick Brown called Nirvana, like something Nirvana. Like I never remember the title. Is it A Path to Nirvana or something like that by Mick Brown? So it's not immediately about yoga, but it's about yogis. Nirvana Express, it's called. Super good book, so detailed. He's talking about how yogis came over in the 20th century, like talking about Sai Baba and Osho and all these yogis and what happened and how it went. It's really fascinating. So it's kind of about yoga, but not extensively
Okay.
just about asana or anything. Yeah.
What is sacred for you? Whatever, I guess what I don't need to know what sacred means to you,
Yeah.
but if your meaning of
No.
sacred, what is
The,
sacred to you?
you know, honestly, the first thing that comes into my head is people's autonomy. Like I said, the autonomy of their experience. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot to me.
And lastly, any advice for a new teacher in the yoga world?
God, listen to other teachers, but be yourself, right? Don't be a carbon copy of anyone else because it'll never work. Like, go to loads of different teachers, see what fits with you, see what resonates with you, and trust your intuition. But keep your faculties open because there's a lot of teachers out there, and you've got to be yourself in the end if you're going to be successful. You've got to be yourself.
Nice. Wonderful. Thank you so much. And just let people know where they can find you.
Yeah, like I said, Keen on Yoga is the website. And my name is Adam Keen. It's a stupid pun.
Mm.
Too long ago we invented that. And my social media, I suppose, Adam Keen Ashtanga. So I'm just talking about yoga at the end of the day for you guys that are not Ashtanga people. So don't be put off by the Ashtanga part. I'm just interested in yoga and on the broader context, as I go on. So yeah, please come and see what I'm doing. Thanks, Adam, for having me.
Thank you so much.
Honestly unbalanced.